Olá, Helenos e Helenas, eu sou Társilo Delfim e a gente está começando mais uma RB Entrevista, dessa vez uma RB Entrevista extremamente especial. Eu estou recebendo aqui hoje Wayne Barton, que é o biógrafo, na verdade, do Rafael e do Fábio da Silva, que ele, inclusive, lançou o livro deles lá na Inglaterra e eu quero ver com ele aqui se, inclusive, ele vai lançar o livro aqui no Brasil também. Hello, Wayne. Thank you very much for coming. Thank you very much for your time.
Hola, which is about all I know I know obrigado as well. My Portuguese is not so great, thank you, but thank you for having me.
All right. So you should know Botafogo by now then.
Of course, and some other words I can't pronounce yet, but it basically means El Fuego, right? Botafogo's on fire.
That's right. There you go. Well, Wayne, let me just make a very brief introduction to our public here, to our audience here. So you are an author, ghostwriter, and you're also a producer, right?
That's correct.
And according to your website, according to your profile on your website, you have worked with renowned Hollywood actors and world-famous musicians also. And you have also worked with Premier League legends. Can you mention some of the names you have worked with?
Yeah, absolutely. Obviously, most of my work is centered on Manchester United. So I've had the fortune of spending mornings with Sir Alex Ferguson, other managers of Manchester United history, Wilf McGuinness, Tommy Docherty, Ron Atkinson. I worked with the family of Jimmy Murphy, who was the assistant coach to Matt Busby. His importance in Manchester United history is, if your viewers are familiar with the Munich air crash, Jimmy Murphy was the youth team coach of the Busby Babes, and after the crash, he sort of stepped in to become the first team manager for a few months. One of the most important men in United history, and effectively, I wrote the biography of him with his family's blessing, and obviously numerous players. Too many to mention, but of course, Rafael and Fabio, the reason for why I'm with you today. Those are the footballers. You mentioned some of the other work that I've done. The actor, I've worked with one actor, and his name is Charlie Baker. He was in Breaking Bad, and it's really great. So, I don't want to bore people with my list of people that I've worked with, but from a Manchester United perspective, because I'm a Manchester United fan, it's been a real indulgence for me to be able to work with these people, considering I'm a lifelong fan.
Yeah, you have been quoted by The Independent 2015 as the leading writer on Manchester United. And Martin Edward, a former owner of United, also said that you are the preeminent writer on the club. So it is a great honor, it must be a great honor for you to be of such an importance to the club literature, and also it's the club you're a fan of, it's the club you follow, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, the Martin is possibly the most knowledgeable person on United. He has every book, he knows everything. Obviously, he was the owner for such a long time. Yeah, when he said that, it was one of the greatest things that's ever been said about my work. You can't get a higher compliment than that. And at the end of the day, I see myself as a fan who is lucky enough to write about the club that I love. It's just blossomed into this crazy life where I've been able to talk to, like I said, the many legends that have played for the club. But yeah, without question, having something like that said about me is just crazy, really. It's beyond a dream.
Yes, absolutely. And how many books have you written so far right now?
Well, there are probably around 19 or 20 that are published. And I always get confused with the figure because I'm working on 3 or 4 at any one time. One will take a rest for a little bit. I think the number's around 20 at the moment. I should have probably prepared that before I came on to answer the question, but it is around that figure.
And do you know how many of them are totally dedicated to Manchester United?
Yeah, all but so I wrote a biography of Gordon Jago, who was the former Millwall and QPR manager. and I've written 3 fiction novels. So that's four books, and the rest are all dedicated to United. Yeah.
So I'd like to mention some of the books you wrote about United, and if you could, I'd like you to make some brief comments on each of them.
Yeah.
One of them is You Can't Win Anything with Kids. I love this title. I mean, I know the story, but I'd like you to briefly make a comment about that. And why have you chosen this title?
Well, in England, effectively what happened was Manchester United they were bringing through a youth team of players. They were very good. They won the Youth Cup, and 3 years later, after winning the Youth Cup, they were all in a position to be. They were ready for the first team, and a lot of them had already been introduced into the first team, but they'd been gently introduced, so they weren't. Nobody thought that they were all ready to go in at once. Alex Ferguson, the manager, he sold 3 key players on the eve of the 95-96 season. 3 very popular players as well. 3 major sort of personalities in the team, if you like. It would be at least 2 of them are going to go down as club legends. And it was a very unpopular decision to let them go. And on the first day of the season, we played against Aston Villa and we lost 3-1 with many of these young players involved. And a former Liverpool player on Match of the Day, which is it's obviously a world famous show. For viewers who aren't familiar, every Saturday after the football, one of our major television networks shows Match of the Day, which is a summary of all the games days, all of the day's games. And on the show, they had a former Liverpool legend, and he said, after he was analysing the game where we lost, and he said, "You'll never win anything with kids." That was his damning indictment.
You can say his name here, because I don't think this interview will be seen in England. So he will hold no grudge against you, right?
Yeah, Alan Hansen. He was a legendary Liverpool defender, and possibly the greatest Liverpool defender of all time.
Yeah, true.
Great. And do you know what? The comment that he said was fair. At the time, it wasn't a rash judgment, because the practicality of it was they shouldn't have won what they went on to win. So it was actually a fair and balanced comment that he made. And it sort of emphasised how spectacular United's achievement was, that they did indeed go on to... That season, they won the League and Cup double. But then there was the basis of the team that had David Beckham, Nicky Butt, Paul Scholes, the Nevilles, Ryan Giggs, and they went on to win, obviously, everything. They won everything with kids. So
yeah. and the funny thing is that it was not the first time United had done that, because, as you mentioned, by the time of the Munich tragedy, United was forced to play young players in order to have a team to play, to have a team to compete. And they have been quite successful in that time, even though, in tragic circumstances. With Alex Ferguson, actually, it was more like a visionary thing. Would you agree with that? Do you think he knew exactly what he was doing, or do you think it was a lucky strike?
No, it wasn't lucky. It was deliberate. The ethos of the youth system at Manchester United goes back to the 1930s. So Busby came in as manager in the late 40s after the Second World War, and he implemented this youth strategy, which, as I said earlier, Jimmy Murphy came in as his assistant. He oversaw the whole youth system. That's what became known as the Busby Babes, where 9 or 10 of the first team eventually were all developed by the club, and they were winning league titles. They won 2 league titles before Munich, and from then, obviously the philosophy of the club changed a little, because it had to, because they had to stay competitive, so they had to bring in players. The balance of sort of 10 youth players to 1 brought in wasn't sustainable anymore. They had to compete. It was like 4 to 6, which was still good by any other standard in football. Basically, it wasn't their own standard. So by the time it got to the 1980s, when Sir Alex became manager, he wanted to reintroduce that philosophy. He spoke to Sir Matt Busby, talked to Jimmy Murphy, and they talked about how they would implement that for a modern era. And he could even argue that Sir Alex's system was more successful because he yielded more players for the team, not more at one particular time in the team, but overall many more. But it was basically it was formed on the club's philosophies from way back. But to actually do that 40 or 50 years later was incredible, really.
Yeah, true. The other book I was going to mention here now is about a character you have already mentioned, who's also of greatest importance to the club. It's The Man Who Kept the Red Flag Flying High. It's about Mr. Murphy, right?
Yeah, and like I said, Jimmy, for me, because of what he did in stabilising the club after the disaster and the tutelage of the young players in the first place, I describe him as the greatest influence on the club, the most important person in the club's history, because he was so responsible for the personality, for shaping the personality of those young players, and creating basically the personality of the Busby Babes, which the club have basically built on forever. And in coming back after the disaster and playing on a couple of weeks after, he basically said, "We won't be beaten by tragedy. We'll overcome any difficulty in front of us." So whenever you see the reputation of Manchester United scoring late goals, that's where it comes from.
Right. And when we talk about Manchester United nowadays, everybody has this, this picture of a very successful club, one of the most successful clubs in the world, the most successful club in England. But not many people know United have been relegated before. And there is a book you wrote about that, which is Too Good to Go Down, right?
Yeah, 2 books, in fact. I wrote a book on the actual the season where they were in the second division. They were relegated before. They were relegated many years before that as well, back in the 1930s and 20s, I think, twice. So they had history of it. But in the modern era, 1974, that was 6 years after they won the European Cup, or Champions League these days. 6 years, really. If you could imagine one of the biggest clubs in the world losing all the best players, Bobby Charlton, George Best, Dennis Law, all of these players went, and then they were somehow relegated. It was a mixture of loss of confidence, too many managers turned over in a short period of time. Perhaps the fact that Sir Matt Busby was quite old and he was focusing on the now rather than the future of the club. Many threads. But United, they went down. And in a way, a lot of those guys that I talked to for the book, and they also made a film from Too Good to Go Down, a lot of those guys involved in that team would speak about the importance of being relegated, because it enabled a new generation of fans to feel a connection with the club again in a strange sort of way. And these players also feeling a connection to the club, that they had to go down to get the confidence to win again. And then by the time they were promoted, they had a new style of play and everything like that. So they actually rediscovered themselves. And a lot of the players that I spoke to, because I've spoken to many of those players from that team, they all talk about how it was an important year for them as professionals, because it basically cemented their relationship with the club.
Yeah. King Garrick, this is certainly one of the greatest characters of our modern times in English football, despite the fact he was French, but the impact he had in English football was immense, was huge. And you wrote King Garrick. Tell us a few words about that.
Well, we had 2 kings at Manchester.
You probably saw Eric Cantona playing, right?
Yeah. I saw day one to the last day when he retired. The most important player in Manchester United history, possibly the most important player in English football history, because when he arrived at United in 1992, it was right at the start of the Premier League. And because of the controversy and the success and the style, United won the 4 out of 5 league titles. Eric Cantona, he inspired 4 of them. And then in the one that we didn't win, he kung fu kicked a fan who was being hurling racist abuse at him. In that time, United's value as a club, it increased by times 20. It multiplied that much. They were worth £30 million when he arrived, and by the time of his retirement, they were worth more than £600 million. And he had a massive commercial influence on that, just by the brand that he was. No player in football history I would probably even argue the world, but certainly in English football, where I could definitely show you the figures, no player has had that kind of transcending impact. Yes, a lot of it is to do with the Premier League and the marketability of that, but Cantona was the forefront figure, and there's the argument that exists that if he wasn't there, then it wouldn't have been as successful. So for those reasons, maybe he wouldn't even go down as the best, but in terms of what he was at that time, just a remarkable footballer. Certainly my favourite growing up.
Yeah, absolutely. You said there were two kings actually. Who would be the other one?
Dennis Law was the original
Dennis
king.
Law, yeah. Yeah, true. How about Beckham, the making of a megastar?
Well, David Beckham's always been an interesting figure to me. I've always, well, when I was growing up, I'm only a few years younger than David, and the class of '92, apart from Eric Cantona being my hero, the class of '92 were a similar age to me. I was very interested in them. That was a case of my publisher talking to me about what books, I had planned to write.
Let me just show the audience the DVD Class of 92. Aí, galera, esse aqui, ó, é o time de 92, versão em português do filme que o Wayne acabou de mencionar. E tem no Netflix, se não me engano, tá disponível no Netflix também. I'm sorry, man.
No, yeah, David Beckham was in the class of '92, obviously, and yeah, it was a case of my publisher saying to me, "What books are you working on at the moment? What ideas do you have?" So I've mentioned that I'd wanted to write something about David Beckham, the footballer. It's a bit of a theme that I've got with books that I wrote on George Best as well. The idea that being a footballer, ironically, wasn't the focus in English football. It was to do with the celebrity image of those people, and I wanted to remind people, no, David Beckham was actually a brilliant footballer. So yeah, I decided to write the book on that, and it's surprising really because he's such a private guy for such a massive celebrity. A lot of people were willing to go on record and talk about what a great guy that he was. So it was a great book to write.
And how did it feel when he left? When you saw him, when you saw he was about to leave? First, everybody knows he had a spat with Sir Alex Ferguson. He got the hair dryer treatment in the dressing room. That's what was habit. And sometime after that, he left the club. He was sold to Real Madrid. How did it feel seeing such an iconic player for his time leaving the club?
Might surprise you to know that it wasn't as dramatically sad as Eric Cantona leaving. So Eric Cantona retired, and there was a communal sadness. We were all devastated by it. There were people who would turn up to Old Trafford, the stadium, because they didn't know what to do. Because he retired. When David Beckham left,
Felt like the end of an era, right?
Certainly, yeah. And it was like that with Beckham as well. But Beckham had become such a dominant celebrity that Sir Alex would often talk about the difficulty of the circus that came around. The circus was the press. So many journalists surrounding the club all the time, and they'd be talking about David Beckham's haircut or what he was wearing, and it would frustrate Sir Alex Ferguson, who was basically, if anyone's ever read his book, and I'm sure it's probably available in Portuguese, Leading, he talks about control and the power of control, and you could tell that the reason why he sold David Beckham was to ensure that he had control of the dressing room again. He was sold for a fairly low figure in those days, and even then, 25 million we all thought that was pretty low for a player of that marketability. His crossing and free kicks were as good as anyone in the world, and yeah, we were all surprised when he went, but not as surprised as when Eric Cantona went. We could sort of see why he'd made that decision. He was sad because he was one of our players who'd come through that class of '92. But in hindsight, when you look at why Sir Alex did it, I think we all understood. I mean, don't get me wrong, I would have loved to have seen him come back. I would have loved for him never to have gone. But at one point, his celebrity was so big that we came to that line where he would have to either say, I can't have that profile anymore and relent a little bit, or we had to move separate ways.
Yeah, sure. And coincidentally, either Cantona and Beckham wore the iconic number 7 shirt. And the next book I would like to ask you about is True Genius, where you write about, if not the best, but one of the best players the world has ever seen. And if we can talk about something that is absolutely unfair, is the fact the world had never had the pleasure to see George Best play in the World Cup. And what can you say about True Genius? How do you define George Best as genius? What is a genius for you?
I think it's just that a player who plays the game at his own pace. So if you see the player on the pitch and it looks like it's his game, he's controlling the game, and not in a dictatorial way. But we know, like a player can pull the strings in the middle of the park, but a player who will just look like Ronaldinho is a great example for you guys. Just a player who, as the game by, it's his game basically. He's making everything happen in a way that other players can't make it happen. Ronaldo, the Brazilian Ronaldo, was just a fantastic example of that, and certainly that was what George Best was. Garrincha obviously is another one. A player who gets the ball, and it doesn't really matter. The other 21 players are just playing the supporting cast to George Best at the time, who was making everything happen. And when George Best decided that he was going to win the game, he would do that because that's how good he was. I argued the case in the book, and obviously it's with a large slice of bias because I'm a Manchester United fan, that George was the greatest of all time. When you watch him play, the things that he did, the way that he dribbled, how effortlessly he was with that, and how ahead of his generation he was. I made the case in the book that he was becoming a player in the 1960s. Basically, that's when he broke through into the game, and the rules on tackling, particularly in English football, were relaxed. You could be quite agricultural with the way that you wanted to tackle. We had a lot of players renowned for the viciousness of their tackling, and George, before the rules caught up to protect
tackles between the waist and the knee were allowed back then.
Exactly, and if you watch a few of them on George Best, you'll see that they did it. Famously, there was a one where Carlos Bilardo of Estudiantes, when they played in the Club World Cup, the Intercontinental Cup as it was then, he went in on a similar one of those tackles on George, and George just sort of stopped and passed him the ball, said if you want the ball, you can have it. George did that a few times. But those kind of tackles were in the game in England, and basically what happened was the rules weren't catching up to protect players like George. So what George did was he learned to beat the fouls. He was so quick as a player that he just learned not only to beat the tackle, but he learned how to be quicker than the fouls. And that's why I thought it put him in a category that few other players could be in, because you never saw a player. The rules would always catch up to help players like they have done now. George was ahead of the game. And whenever people talk about generational players, because they always talk about athletics now, don't they? And they say that you couldn't put a player like Messi would be far better than a player of 60 years ago. Now, I think that George Best is the greatest argument against that, because he showed that the game, he was in front of the game basically, and basically it was his illness that caught up with him in the end. Sadly, because he was he suffered from alcoholism. And the game, never saw the best of him. You're quite right. It's a shame that he never played in a World Cup. But by the time that Northern Ireland played in World Cups, the disease had got him so badly that you wouldn't have wanted to have seen that version of George Best playing a World Cup. I liken it to Ronaldo. Ronaldo pre-98, pre the injury. That Ronaldo in the World Cup was much better than the Ronaldo after. Do you know? I know that he won the best player in 2006, but I think you know what I mean with that.
Yeah, but the player I liken him to is Garrincha from Botafogo. They had very similar styles. Even though George Best scored more goals than Garrincha, Garrincha was more like a winger, and he would always prefer to assist rather than score goals.
Yeah.
But he also had a dazzling dribble, and he's the kind of player that he had everything against him. He had all it took not to never become a football player. He had a crooked leg, and his left leg was shorter than the right one, so he actually limped. So yeah, how could a player like that ever be a professional player and play the World Cup and win the World Cup for his country? And he did, and he also suffered from alcoholism as well. So in a certain way, I believe there is a kind of a link between George Best and Garrincha. And sometimes I get goosebumps when I watch George Best compilation videos and when I watch Garrincha as well. And even though they were separated by an ocean, they lived in different continents in different times. The gap was not so big. It's amazing to see how similar they were and how they could do things that no other players in that time could.
Yeah. Well, George was influenced by Garrincha.
He mentioned that, I think. He wrote a letter to his family back in Ireland, and he mentioned that he was playing like he wanted to play like Garrincha. Yeah. Said something like that. And then finally we got the Sunshine Kids. Now we finally come down to it. The Sunshine Kids, man, you have written about Rafael and Fabio, and these guys are now sitting next to other legends from United, because these guys we mentioned here before deserved your attention and deserved your time and your dedication to write about why Rafa and Fabio, what makes them so special for you.
Well, when you grow older, as any football fan, you have your teen years where you fall in love with your football team. Obviously, you're a child. Sometimes you don't have a choice of the club that you support. You're born into that. And then you grow a little bit older, you develop your own likes, and then you fall in love with your team a little bit more. You choose them. You don't choose them, but you are making those decisions for yourself. And then you get a little bit older, like I did, and you get more cynical. Mm-hmm. You don't enjoy the sport as much because there's the business aspects of it, and everything like that. And then what happened to me was that the twins, Ronaldo, Rooney, there was a youthfulness in the team and they became successful again. The twins were they were the personality of the side, basically. They were the fun of it. They made you, it was the enjoyment of football, and they brought that back. Like Ronaldo and like Rooney, they were part of that same group, but they always played with a smile on their face. You knew that they were playing to entertain you, as well as win. But they wanted you to be entertained, and they did it with a smile on their face as well. You knew that the people around the club loved them. So yeah, from that period of time, they were two of my favourite players, and I say that without reservation, and that's in comparison to the number of great players that we had. Those two were two of my very favourites. I absolutely love them, and like you said, obviously I've been writing about the club for a long time. And at the start of 2020, I think some guy shared a tweet with me, she just shared a tweet that I saw on Twitter, and it was of one of Rafa's goals, and I shared it. It's like, oh, that's a great goal. I think it might be the one that he scored against Liverpool. A great goal. Every goal that he scored for us was great. So I shared it, and
he's got that goal with the left leg, right?
He scored a couple with the left.
That's true.
His first goal against Arsenal was with his left as well, and that was a brilliant goal. Absolutely brilliant goal.
But against Liverpool at Anfield, there's something very special about that.
Yeah, and we won as well. We won.
Yeah.
And by that time, he'd been at the club for 4 or 5 years. He knew how special it was as well, which made it even better. You could see from his celebration. He'd been through a lot at Anfield. He'd seen a lot at Anfield, and just it's a very, very special moment. And we won the title that season. So so I think it might have been that goal. So someone else, after I shared that tweet and said what a goal this was, someone said, "Oh, Rafa should be your next book." And I just said, "Well, of course, I'd love to do that." Like, I would say that, obviously I'm going to say that because I love Rafa. And basically, Rafa sent me a message and said, let's do it. But I didn't know that in the meantime, he talked to his wife, and his wife had seen the tweet and said, "Oh, you should talk to him about it." And Rafa was initially, did you see? I think he must have said to his wife, "Did you see it?" Someone said, and he wasn't sure. Eventually, we talked, and he said, "Yeah, let's do it." He said, "But one condition is I'll only do it if Fabio's involved." And I was like, "Oh, yes, that's even better for me because I love both of you." I didn't know how it would work, but then the pandemic hit, and it gave everyone a lot of free time. Rafa was still in France at the time, and Fabio was recuperating from his injury. He had a very serious injury, so Rafa went to stay with him once the pandemic rules allowed in France. So they went. They were staying together, and that's when we started working. We had a few video chats. I planned to go to France a few times, but the pandemic rules would always change just before I was going to do that. But yeah, for a year or so, we either with Fabio and Rafael alone, or with them both together, and they played the twin tricks on me. One said that they were the other. That happened a few times, but yeah, for a year we worked on the book together, and it was just very natural. They were, considering that Raphael had initially felt apprehensive about it. They were very natural, very honest. I think the fact that English wasn't their first language, but they're very good at speaking English. But the fact that it wasn't the first language helped with the honesty of the way that they told the story. They said there was no barriers, and I think the fact that obviously I've worked with people like Sir Alex, they knew that they could trust me, and that I would articulate what they wanted to say in the way that they wanted to say it. So we had to have that element of trust. So just because it was through the pandemic and it was a difficult time for everyone. I've always told everyone this, that it was the most fun I've ever had working on a book, because every time we would just laugh for an hour. For every interview that we did for the book, I'd just be laughing all the time. And don't get me wrong, there were times when it'd be very emotional and there were a few tears as well, but we'd always be laughing within a few minutes after that. That's what these guys do. And so you've got to remember that Rafa left 5 or 6 years ago from United.
Mm-hmm.
And in that time, again, United have not been very good. They've had a bit of a decline. And in this period of time of working with the guys on the book, it's made me fall in love with everything that I love about my club again. And I said that to them, like, you've given me this gift of making me remember why I love my club. That's why I've always said to the Botafogo fans who have been talking to me about this, is that they did that for me, and that's not their club. Do you know what I mean? And this is your club, and if he gives you just half of what he gave me, and this is Rafa I'm speaking, but Fabio could easily be the same, that it just enriches the entire experience. To feel the way that I do about my club again is something that I'm thankful to them for.
Yeah, I believe this is pretty much the way most Botafogo fans feel at the moment, because Rafael has given up a lot to come to Brazil and to sign for Botafogo. And he knows the club situation nowadays. We are cash trapped and we are playing second division football. Yes, we are in a very good position to get promoted next year, but still the stakes are very high. And he has chosen his boyhood club. And it's different from having had many offers on the table and then picking the one that was more perhaps favorable money-wise, or I mean, whatever reason it might be. He clearly chose Botafogo because it's his boyhood club, and he had the dream to play for it. And at the moment he makes this decision, that he makes a huge effort to come to play here, fans also in a way revive that kind of feeling that was long lost, because of all circumstances the club has been through. And I believe that this kind of, feeling, this is the club I love, this is the club I grew up loving. I guess he's bringing this kind of feeling back, and
Yeah.
it's a great atmosphere. It's wonderful. It's a very good moment for us now, you see. And if we get promoted and he helps us to get promoted, it's going to be even better. See, it's going to be wonderful. I'd like to. You have launched the book in England, right? How long has it been available now in England?
About 6 or 7 weeks now. So
6 or 7 weeks.
Early August. Yeah.
Oh, okay, I see. And I have bought the Kindle version, and I started reading here. I've also bought the True Genius book about George Best also, and I have not finished reading yet the Sunshine Kids. So the moment we were talking here, I had about 50% of the book read, and some of the things they mentioned there really caught my eye. For example, the relationship they had with some players, especially with Cristiano Ronaldo, how close they were, and how Cristiano Ronaldo has been, quite an important person in convincing them to signing for United. What's their relationship with these players like? They also mentioned Darren Fletcher. What was their relationship with these players like?
Well, with Ronaldo, they were there for maybe 18 months. They arrived in the winter of 2008, with the early winter, so January 2008, because of the contractual dispute they had with Fluminense, where they weren't allowed to play for a year. So they arrived in Manchester early to become acclimatized. So they saw the 6 months where United won the European Cup and Ronaldo. People can prefer Messi, but in my opinion, he became the greatest player of the world in this period of time. So they witnessed how that changed on the training pitch, how he evolved into that kind of player, the kind of dedication that he was showing to everything to do with the personal development. And Rafael was obviously impressed with the talent. He played with him from very early days. Basically, he was playing with him. Fabio played closer to him in the team when they did play. So Fabio had a really close relationship with understanding Ronaldo as a player. But you're quite right that and it shouldn't have happened this way, but this tells you a lot about these guys as individuals. Their closest people, like you said, were Darren Fletcher, Wayne Rooney, and Sir Alex Ferguson. I have to tell you about these guys. Darren Fletcher's from Scotland.
Yeah.
Wayne Rooney's from Liverpool. Sir Alex Ferguson is from Scotland, and obviously he was in his 70s, a very different generation to these guys. Darren Fletcher and Wayne Rooney from working class families. So is Sir Alex, but obviously he's a much older generation, like I said. They didn't understand the language when they came over. So how could it tells you that football transcended language barriers for these guys to immediately strike up close friendships with these people. Paul McGuinness as well, he was a youth team coach at United, but they became very close with him because they basically showed a willingness to want to spend every minute on the training ground, even when they were not allowed to play for 6 months. They wanted to do everything they could to improve, so that when the time came, they were ready to play straight away. And it was so unusual that they turned 18 in the July and they were straight into the first team. It wouldn't normally happen like that, especially for South American players. You've seen a lot of those players come over. Palestri is a player that we just signed from Uruguay, and he had a year on loan and he's nowhere near the first team, and he's older than what the Twins were. It was so unusual for the Twins to be in there, which spoke for their quality, but also in the way that they settled. And like I said, Manchester in England is a peculiar place in England. So you could go from London and not settle in Manchester because it's always raining in Manchester. It's not just a reputation, it's the truth. So they moved from the sunny beaches of Brazil to rainy Manchester, and they seem to settle in. And like I said, like you said, with the guys that they got to know, because they got to know the local people, their friendships were built with the local people. They very quickly became in tune with the philosophy of the club. And that's why it happened so quickly and so naturally. They had great relationships with these people. Everyone at the club, everyone loved them. Nobody disliked them. They had
except Tevez.
well,
Rafa mentions Tevez.
yes, there's Carlos Tevez,
Yeah.
but that was to do with Carlos's. He was divisive, you know. Rafa wasn't the only person that Carlos Tevez didn't get on with. Just to be fair, Rafa speaks from his heart. A lot of people probably didn't get on with Carlos Tevez, but they wouldn't come out and say it. Whereas Rafa is not going to tell you a lie; he will tell you the truth, and he'll tell you the reason for it. Fabio would be more diplomatic. You know, Rafa's not bothered about diplomacy. He'll tell, and that's a good thing. It's a really good thing because you know that he's telling you the truth and he's coming from a good place. And the reasons for why he didn't like Carlos Tevez, because he went to a rival. We can all understand that. It's a universal football thing.
Yeah, and some other players have been also quite influential in their careers as well. They mentioned Rio Ferdinand as being of great help, especially on the pitch with the language. He said that Rio always kept it simple. He would always give them instructions with one words only. They would say right, left, stop, move. They would always keep it simple. And then football spoke its own language, but there was at some point, at some level, that for a foreigner, for example, speaking from this perspective, because I'm a foreigner in England, I lived in England for a couple of years as well. It helps a lot. It helps quite a lot when you know that there is someone you can count on, especially with the language, in order to overcome the language barrier. And they mentioned Rio as another very important person in the way they sell in the club. And they also mentioned Scholes and gigs. I imagine how big this must have been to them to play with those guys they used to play with on video game. So what was it like for them? What did they say about sharing the pitch with the likes of Scholes, gigs? And I'm gonna save Gary Neville for another question because there is something specific I'd like to know about that. But how about Scholes and gigs? Because they were veterans by the time they got there. They are players who impersonate Manchester United. Yeah. So if you in that time, if you say what is a typical Manchester United player, you would say gigs, you would say Scholes, and they have only played for Manchester United all their careers. What was it like for them? How do you think playing with Scholes and gigs has helped Rafa and Fabio build up this kind of becoming a United player mentality, a winning mentality?
I think with those players, I mean, we mentioned Ronaldo earlier, and you could see that he had his own standards and United were winning. So they knew they had to match those standards of personal dedication on the training pitch. With Giggs and Scholes, because they were in their late 30s at that point, and they'd already won numerous league titles, numerous trophies, I think it was more a matter of conduct, the way that they carried themselves as people, the way that they carried themselves as Manchester United players, you know, the way that they didn't have an ego about them, that they would separate themselves from the group. They were very much part of the group. They were just normal, down-to-earth people who would treat everyone in the dressing room the same as long as they were giving their all for the club. And really, I don't think Giggs or Scholes were ever the kind of player who would speak out against that, even if they saw it. Gary Neville might, but those guys would sort of sit and be quiet, and they would lead by example. And I think that's what the twins admired in them. Rio Ferdinand was a little bit younger, and obviously they were playing directly next to Rio or Nemanja Vidic. You mentioned the language barrier there and the way that they kept it simple. That, for me, is one of the most peculiar things about top-level football. that you probably have to be of such an outstanding level of ability that the instructions can be so simple. But it shows you how good those guys were as players and how good the timing of Rio Ferdinand was and how much the trust that he had in Rafael or Fabio just to say, stop, go. And in the end, as Rafael talks about, he basically said they would talk more about what Rafael wanted to do, when he would like to go, so that Ferdinand himself could learn. Now I have to move. Now I have to, things like that. And that was a sign of the great respect that Ferdinand had, because a lot of players, I mean, Ferdinand, I have him as United's greatest ever defender. So for him to have the respect in Rafael to say to him, I'm probably going to be covering, because he was the right-sided central defender more often than not. He talked to Rafael and he showed him the respect to say, you play your natural game and we'll make it work together. And Rafael went on to become one of our great right backs, and we won titles with him in the team. So it went both ways basically. They learned a lot, but as they grew, the team respected them as well.
Yeah, I spared Gary Neville because they played the same position. But by the time Rafa was signing for Manchester United, by the way, there is a question from one of our teammates here, Davi Nunes Ugajo. Let me just mention his name here. He sent you a question. He wanted to know whether when Rafael signed for Manchester United, Sir Alex wanted to sign only one of the twins, or he always had in mind signing both of them.
Both. There were 4 players, and you'll have to excuse me because the other 2 don't immediately come to mind. But there were 4 players who went over from Fluminense.
Okay.
Rafa went first on trial, and when he came back with one of the scouts, they said, "Oh, you can come back for another trial." And Rafa said, "Well, what about my brother?" And he said, "No, don't worry, he's going to come as well." I think there might have been a conflict at the time. Maybe Fabio was playing for the national side or something. The way that it worked out, Rafa just went first, and then Fabio. The plan was always to sign them together. There was never a time at all where they even considered anything other than that.
And back to Gary. Gary was at a moment of his career when he was maybe not yet to retire, but he would still play, I don't know, 4 more years or 5 more years when Rafa signed for Manchester United. But he was definitely not at the peak anymore. How did Gary Neville see the arrival of the kids? Do you think he felt threatened somehow that they were trying to give him a message like it's time to go? I strongly believe Gary would never settle for that. He would never accept this kind of situation. But do you think he might have taken this way?
Yeah, no, well, yeah, he joked to people, well, they brought those twins here to retire me. You have to remember at the time, Fabio was the more highly rated of the 2.
I remember
that. Fabio could play. I mean, Rafa was always seen as a right back, the right-sided defender, whereas Fabio, we always thought he could play in a number of different positions. Play in either full-back position or in defensive midfield. We thought he could play. So Gary initially thought that he said that he actually told people the twins are being brought here to retire me, and then everyone would then joke with him when they saw how good the twins were. They have come to retire you. Gary, obviously a great servant. His games dwindled because he had a lot of injury problems, but also because Rafael emerged so confidently into that position. There was a couple of years where we had different right backs. Wes Brown was the right back in the year where we won
John
the Champions
O'Shea as well.
John O'Shea. And that was the first season where Rafa was in the team. And I think it was effectively just because it was Rafael's first year that Sir Alex Ferguson thought, I can't not trust him, but I don't want to take the gamble with him in the big Champions League games because he might not be ready for it. He was still only 18. So John O'Shea, who was a loyal pro, he played in and played in the final. So Gary Neville was already on the way out with his injury problems. He was still around the club, but the more that the years went on, it was obvious that it was catching up with him, and he stayed there. I mean, and I think in a way he was responsible for the acceleration of the Twins' development, because he was still showing up every day, even though he was being defeated by time, which happens to every professional. He said in the last 6 months, because he retired in the mid-season, because he had a particularly poor game, and he just said, I wasn't enjoying training every morning because I was turning up and having to match their energy in training. So they effectively did retire him, but age retired him as well. And to be fair, he was always very gracious about it.
And do you see any similarity between the Twins being brought to Manchester and to the case of the Neville brothers? Do you see Alex Ferguson had somehow he was trying to replicate the success with the Neville brothers with the Da Silva brothers? Is there anything similar in their cases?
He might have done, but I would say that it's a difficult comparison because I think the Twins had more natural ability than the Neville brothers. And I wouldn't say that the Twins were any less committed than the Neville brothers. Maybe the circumstances weren't there for, Phil Neville got many, many chances in the team, and he was probably lucky where Fabio wasn't lucky. The chances were there for him, and they weren't there for Fabio. But he certainly had the same talent as him. I just think that was a freak of luck that the Twins came along, and they were so reminiscent. But certainly, I will say this, and I don't think anyone with a Manchester United connection would mind me saying it. The Nevilles were quite dour personalities, and that's a complete contrast to the Twins. They're vibrant, they're lovely, energetic, always making you laugh, whereas you're more likely to argue with a Neville.
Always switching identities as well to fool people around in the dressing room, right? Yeah, sometimes Rafa would pretend to be Fabio. Fabio would pretend to be Rafa. In one of these occasions, they even got misbooked by the referee. I think it was Mike Dean. Was it Mike Dean? I don't know if it.
It was at Barnsley. I remember it was a League Cup game, and
yeah.
It was funny because they didn't have many games where they played together. It was only a small handful. Then, one of those games they ended up getting booked. They played that trick on me as well while we were doing the book. I don't know if I ever got where they played the trick, so there might well be a passage in the book where Fabio spoke for Rafa.
Yeah.
Or Rafa spoke for Fabio. But they never told me.
Wayne, I don't want to take much more of the time. I'd just like to know about Sir Alex Ferguson. What is the importance of these men in the making of these two players? And what is the importance of Alex Ferguson in forging their character as a Manchester United player? I remember that once Sir Alex said that, referring to Rafa, that he said that he's a typical Man United player. What is this player that has signed for Botafogo now? What is this player that is coming back home? What can we expect to see from him that when we see him on the pitch, we can look at him and say, this is Sir Alex Ferguson's work?
Yeah, good question. It's a really good question. He has evolved as a player, and yet, having had the many conversations with him over the last year, one of the things that we've talked about a lot is the impetuous streak that he has. Because sometimes he's a very fiery character, and he'll launch into tackles that he perhaps shouldn't launch into. They're more common in England than they were in France or Turkey, where he went to play. So people would be more accepting of those things in England. And he said that he'll never cut that out of his game because it's part of him. And he's very much a guy who says, this is me. I have tried to learn. I've tried to evolve my game, but also I like who I am. And I think who I am, being who I am, is a big reason of why I am where I got to in football. And I think that's a quite a mature way to look at that. You know, you can still evolve without changing too much if you accept who you are. If you accept that occasionally you'll boil over. At Manchester United, we never had a problem with that. And the reason why is because we knew he loved playing for Manchester United. The term a typical Manchester United player is going back to what we were talking about, Jimmy Murphy. And I mean this sincerely as someone who studied all of this period in history, that it means fighting for the crest. You know, you are fighting for the shirt. You're fighting for a cause that's bigger than you because there are thousands of people in the stand who would die to wear that shirt. They would love to wear it. And he represented us as fans. So when there were the big rivalries against Liverpool where he scored, or against an Arsenal, or against a Manchester City with Carlos Tevez in the team, he would be the one standing up to them. And the fans would be galvanised by this. It raised us a notch. We would feel more connected to the performance. Now, I'm saying that as a Manchester United fan. He did that for us. And he was naturally part of that. I know that they credit Sir Alex with that. But they naturally did that themselves as well. That was part of them and part of Rafa. What you can expect is the fact that he loves Botafogo. That's his club. Manchester United wasn't his club. He grew to love Manchester United, and he would say that they were his club as well. But Botafogo's in his heart. They are his club. So you are going to get every single Botafogo fan represented in one player on the pitch. That's the least that you're going to get from him. But you're also going to get the quality. He's a very, very good right back. I don't know if they intend to play him in a different position. He could well play on the right wing. He has the creative ability to do that. He probably has the ability to play in midfield as well. So in certain leagues, I wouldn't put that past him. He could play in that. He all the players that we spoke about, the Wayne Rooneys, the Darren Fletchers, the Cristiano Ronaldos, the Rio Ferdinands, they were all leaders on the football pitch. Rafael, 10 years older than what he was at Manchester United, he's got all of those qualities now. He's learned from all of those players at Manchester United and the other clubs that he's been to. So he is now in a position where he can be a leader. He can be the captain of a team. He can go into your team and say, I love this club. I can lead this team forward. And he's gone that you said, like you're quite right. He could have easily stayed in Europe. He has the quality to do that. I wasn't alone in being a Manchester United fan who thought he could come and play in our squad. He could be a vital member of our squad. That's how highly we still regard him. So that's how high his quality, his standard still is. So he will raise the standard as well. All of the standard of Sir Alex Ferguson, who never accepted anything less than 100% commitment. The same with Cristiano Ronaldo. You're going to see that from Rafael, who will be demanding standards be higher. I want to add in this, and I'm sorry that I want to answer the question as comprehensively.
Please do. Please do.
Rafa has talked a lot in the last year about how he evolves into the next stage of his career. And he's talked about seeing players as human beings. So I don't think you're going to... I've said everything, what I've just said to you, and someone might think, listening to this, oh, well, we don't have players who have the standards of Cristiano Ronaldo, so he might be disruptive, expecting too much. That's not what you're going to get from Rafael. He's a very human person. He understands the people around him. He grows to love the people around him, and he gets the best out. You know, he will raise the atmosphere. He'll make it a better place, and he'll understand the human capabilities and the human relationships around him. It's not about being a disruptive influence, expecting standards that are way too high. It's about raising the standards of everyone so that he can move forward. That's what he'll bring to the team. But also, that's as a spiritual thing, but also as a personal thing, because of his personality, because he loves Botafogo, and because he loves the fact that he's had this opportunity to come home. He sees it as an opportunity for him as well. You guys are like quite rightly delighted that he's come at an earlier time than you were expecting. But he had the offers. He could have gone somewhere else. But he's looked at it and he's thought, I'm making this decision from my heart. What do I want from football? This is what he wants from football. So it's got to be a good thing. There's no bad element to that. And you mentioned the tough times that you guys have had. You've had them. It's part of what you've been through. But you now move into a better place, and he's part of that. It's a reason to be optimistic. And we've got one of my favourite players ever from following Manchester United has gone home, and it made me emotional. And I'm not even connected to you guys. It's just an incredible thing, and I just think it can only be positive the way that I look at it. It can only be positive, and hopefully, if everything goes right, it will be hugely successful for everyone.
That's great to hear all these words, these kind words. And let me just show you one thing here. This is my favorite. This is the one I got from Manchester United Megastore when I lived in England. It had to be the number 7. It had to be the iconic number 7. And I hope one day you can get Botafogo number 7 as well. I'm personally committed to making it happen. So when you come down here to Brazil, like you promised on Twitter that you would anytime soon, I'll make sure to hand you personally the number 7, the iconic number 7 shirt by from Botafogo, straight into your hands. And I'd like you to leave us a message to Botafogo fans, a message to Rafael as well, because he will see that. I'll make sure he'll see you talking about him.
I'll show him as well. A message to the Botafogo fans. I'm one of you now. I'm adopted as one of you guys. I look for every result. I'm definitely following you. Big fan already. I love the strips. I love the fact that you are one of the oldest institutions, that you have this history of great players that have played for you. I love all of that. I'm into it. I'm studying it as I go along. I'm learning to become a Botafogo. Is it Botafogonese? I'm still not au fait with the language. For Rafa, I love you as a guy. You're one of the best guys that I know in football, and I'm so happy for you that you are living your dream. It's one of the best things to have happened this year. To watch it happen has just been amazing. For me, I was excited that we signed Ronaldo, and all that's been happening back at Manchester United. And then Rafa went to you guys. He went home, and it just feels like it's the same thing. Do you know what I mean? It really does. And I'm so excited for him. I'm so excited for his family that he gets to be with them again. And it's just a perfect thing. And I'm so happy.
Great, Wayne. It's been a huge pleasure. Thank you very much for your time. I'm just gonna consider this this chat our first chat, because this is just gonna be the first part of an interview, which I hope will be completed when Fabio also comes home and signs for Botafogo, right? Thank you very much for your kindness, for your generosity, and é isso aí, galera. Muito obrigado. Esse foi o RB Entrevista com Wayne Barton, biógrafo do Fábio e do Rafael da Silva, que falou aqui diretamente com a gente na Rádio Botafogo. Um grande abraço para vocês, seja membro da Rádio Botafogo, se inscreva no canal, se inscreva aqui na Rádio Botafogo, e você tem a chance, né, como membro, sempre de receber esse tipo de material em primeira mão, tá bom? Um grande abraço para vocês, muito obrigado. Wayne, thanks a lot. And it's been a real pleasure. So anytime you want, whenever you come to Brazil, hope you launch the book in Portuguese as well. Hope you launch the Brazilian version of the book with a new chapter, right? Rafa playing for Botafogo, maybe 2 new chapters, who knows? And look forward to seeing you here.
Brilliant, thank you. Obrigado.
There you go.